Okay, right. It's 8 o'clock. It feels time to make a bit of a start. So, hello everyone. It's nice to it's nice to see you all. Slightly different this week. For obvious reasons, this month even for obvious reasons, we couldn't interview Alf Bonnevie Bryn, the author of Peaks and Bandits. One, because he's Norwegian, and two, because he's long since passed away. So instead, it just so happens we have a second subscription going this month, which is Beyond Adventure, which features Book of Trespass. So I'm sure most of you know, but Beyond Adventure is our new subscription, which features a hefty read, and none more hefty than this, every other month, as well as your regular Adventurers Inc. So in quite a timely manner, we can have a chat with Nick instead of having a chat with a dead Norwegian. Don't know whether you've ever stolen the limelight from a dead Norwegian before, Nick, but there you go. Before we have a chat with Nick, I'd like to introduce everyone to Ant, who I was chatting with earlier. Hello, Ant. I asked Ant to join us from his wild campsite in the depths of Wales, to bring us a bit of that outdoor vibe. And he's just finished work. And is that tea you're cooking, Ant?
It is my dinner, yeah.
What are we having?
So actually some of it's from the garden as well. So we've got some leeks, some parsley, some onions, and some tomatoes, and then I've got some chicken sausages, and voila, chicken casserole, really, isn't it?
Wow, that's amazing. So I hope everyone else has had their tea, because if you haven't, you're going to be absolutely starving watching Ant cook and then scoff this down. So Ant, he does lots of things. What his main gig on Instagram, which is where I know him from, his photography. And tell us what you do that takes you outdoors.
Everything, really. Everything I love is based outdoors. So hiking, cycling, those are probably my two main sort of genres, really. But ultimately wild camping, so I can do this anywhere. Recently got into pack rafting as well, which goes well with both cycling and the hiking. I've got a few friends that are trying to get me into supping. So I think a couple of them are watching tonight.
Do you mean supping like this?
Oh, they definitely do that.
Oh, stand up. Yeah. Very cool. So Ant, we'll come back to you later on, but I've got one question for you. Have you ever trespassed?
Most definitely.
Did you get caught?
Of course not.
Very good, very good. Well, thank you for joining us. Thank you for bringing the outdoor vibe. I think obviously it's going to get dark at some point. If there's a sunset, we're going to come over. And we were having an interesting chat, because you were saying that you've got lots of friends who are farmers who kind of see both sides of the rights of way debate. So I think when we get onto that bit, we'll bring you back in. But folks, feel free to keep half an eye on Ant and what he's having for his tea. Oh, we should give you a little plug at Ant. So for those who've just joined us, we were just talking about those lovely pans that Ant is using there, which bizarrely I sold him the frying pan, but Ant now sells them. Where do you sell them from, Ant? What's your store?
So the store is Little Welsh Farm Co.
And what does Little Welsh Farm Co sell? Obviously, pan.
Ultimately, it's sort of items handmade in the UK, really. I don't have anything that's made outside of the UK. Obviously, some materials have to come outside from the UK, and where possible, they're all handmade. Small artisan makers and artists. Even got this beautiful little beach spoon here, which I've just started selling on the website, and also nets and stuff. But yeah, the idea is sustainability, really, is trying to not bring things from abroad, and ultimately I don't send them abroad either, so I only sell within the UK.
Wow.
So yeah, that's what it's about, really.
Good. And it's littlewelshfarm.co.uk, is that right?
littlewelshfarmco.co.uk.
Welshfarmco.co.uk. Brilliant. Thanks, Sam. We'll pop back and have a chat later on.
No worries.
Right, Nick, welcome to our conversation. Thank you so much for joining us. Are you still doing something with the Idler on Friday night? I know we were originally trying to book you in on Friday. Did that one get cancelled? Or are you still doing
I'm
something?
honestly not sure. It's still in my Google Calendar. Thanks so much for having me, by the way. And yeah, thanks everyone for listening. And I did appreciate your Ladle Rocks reading. Well, I've never been there.
Oh, it's honestly, I'd not been, but I had heard about the cave, and I kind of looked at some pictures of it and thought that doesn't look like much of a cave. But once we got there, it was fab. It was brilliant. It was actually quite cozy. It was warm, and you just get a great view of quite a remote part of the Dark Peak, which isn't even though I cut my outdoor teeth in the Peak District, it wasn't in the Dark Peak. Sorry, it wasn't in that bit of the Dark Peak. So yeah, it was just a good excuse. We will talk about excuses later on. Thank you for writing this fabulous book. I guess writing and illustrating this fabulous book. Yeah, I mean it's one of those books that I have to confess, it sat on my shelf for a bit because I was slightly daunted. It's a hefty old book, but it was one of those books that everyone was asking me about. It was constantly, have you read Book of Trespass? Have you read Book of Trespass? And that was kind of a fair clue that I probably ought to read Book of Trespass. So I did, and I thought it was fabulous, and it was just the right sort of book to introduce the new subscription Beyond Adventure, because what I want to do with that is take people a little bit deeper and give them a bit of a deeper read, and tell them a bit more about things that adventure can illustrate. And I think this book does it wonderfully. I particularly love. It took me all the way back to Mr. Deakin. We read Wildwood from his a couple of years back. It took me down all sorts of diversions into investigating the legacy of our slaving history. I love that phrase that you used about our English country houses being this gleaming gleaming legacy of a rather grim period. So that was good. So
I called them monuments to white supremacy.
There you go.
Not to beat around the bush.
That was the word I was looking for.
The point is, we've got the receipts to prove it as well. You know, there's room for flowery speak, and there's room for pouring petrol on the fire. But certainly the abuse and the rebukes that Corinne Fowler, who's just written Green Unpleasant Land, I understand why people find it very hard to see the core of Englishness attacked in such a way, this notion of the great nation that freed the slaves. But this idea that is coming from, you know, the Telegraph and the Spectator, that we're people that are unpatriotic, that don't love our country. I guess, as the book tries to explain, you know, we're people that dearly love our country, that want to see it come out of its addiction to itself and actually open its eyes without the fluff that we're taught at school. But yeah, so that's strong language, but it's not to be avoided because it is true.
Yeah, absolutely. The only reason I was avoiding it is because I didn't have it written down in front of me, and that was stupid.
No, fair enough.
because I think what we do when we read books, and what I do when I try and curate these things, is I don't want to shy away from difficult issues. I want to be able to bring them out, and that's what we gain from our reading is a whole series of new perspectives. And that doesn't always mean that they're perspectives that you necessarily agree with, but I think in this world when we all live in echo chambers, and it's, you know, we look for the things that agree with our perspective, I think sometimes it's good just to nudge yourself out from there.
Absolutely.
Right then, so we're going to talk about Nick. We're going to talk about your background. I want to have a bit of a chat about your connection with the natural world. I want to talk about creativity, and then obviously I want to talk about the book and rights of way and trespass and all that sort of malarkey. We might go on a little bit past 9 o'clock. I've extended technically it runs until 9:30. We'll see how we go. I've been finding our conversations have been quite compressed. And particularly with having Ant brought into the conversation and those outdoorsy vibes, I wanted to give it all space to breathe. So we might be here until 9:30, but it's not a Friday night, and we don't have Gogglebox to compete with at 9. And when I say Gogglebox, of course, I mean my wife, who wants to watch Gogglebox with me. So there we go. Right, Nick, tell us about the young Nick. So were you always artsy and outdoorsy when you were a little kid?
No, not really. I think I was chatting to a lad called Beans on Toast, who's a musician, the other day. He's just written a song following his reading of the Book of Trespass. And we both kind of agreed that a real burning love for the outdoors, like a kind of, you can't take it away from us now kind of vibe, was actually born at festivals. Like I always found going for walks a little dull. I mean, I appreciate them now, but it's certainly not what got me into it. I never had a granddad that could tell me, the difference between bird song or flowers. I never had education as a way into it. So it was kind of around the age of 15 or 16 when I started both drawing outside and just because there's more to draw than in your bedroom kind of thing. But also festivals, like for me, it was really the sense, and I didn't actually put this in the book because I hadn't clicked until I spoke to this guy Beans on Toast. Like it wasn't just the outdoors, it was the act of coming together and appreciating the outdoors. Like, and it kind of, there's something about community and meeting people outdoors, even if you're not of the same ilk, you're not cut from the same cloth in these kind of partisan, heavily tribal times. It's kind of harder to meet someone in a built-up environment, which has all of these kind of signifiers as to who the right kind of person here is, or who this pub is for, whether you've got a St. George's flag outside it, or flat screen football kind of thing. Actually, the outdoors, if you're just surrounded by trees, that it feels like you're on a level playing ground.
A leveler, isn't it? Yeah. What was your go-to festival as a up and coming teen then?
Rotten festival. It was an absolutely filthy festival. It was Reading Festival, because I lived about 10 miles up the river from it, and like we could hear it in our back garden because the sound traveled down the river, and so it was always the kind of siren call of of what happened when your parents weren't there, kind of thing. But yeah, it was an absolute rotten festival. And
stinky fest. I used to go. That was my first festival. I
really?
I passed my drive. So I lived in Doncaster. Passed my driving test, age of 17, and we headed straight down and we went to the Reading Festival. And that was back in the day when you could park your car next to your tent. Those days.
Oh wow!
Yeah. I know I'm older than I look. I know I wear it very well. I do wear it very well.
I don't mean rotten pejoratively. It's just that genre of festival. Bins on fire, that kind of stuff, like zero sleep, warm Fosters for breakfast, kind of thing.
Bins on fire is my abiding memory of Reading. And now it's right up on my doorstep. So I'm here in Leeds. And we have the Leeds part of Reading and Leeds Festival just over the way, and I'm sure my my proto-teen son will be getting his first experience of festivals like that. And to be honest, I'm quite looking forward to going with him as well. Yeah. Anyway, so when you were a kid, I imagine little Nick reading lots of stuff. You must have been a fan of Danny the Champion of the World.
Yeah, definitely.
What else were you reading when you were a kid?
I mean, I must have read Watership Down 400 times. It was the kind of book that I'd want to just go back and read bits of it, because I knew where the bits were. Wind in the Willows. Oh, what did I read as a kid? No comic books or anything. I read a shitload of Just William and Poirot. This is like, I think I had all of the Poirot books. And then when David Suchet and the stiff English person next to him kind of did it for ITV, that was me made up, basically. Nothing. I mean, not heavily nature. It did take a while for me to just realize nature. I think just realize it was there for the taking. It wasn't until I read The Wild Places by Rob McFarlane that basically, like, it's that Bob Dylan line, every one of those words rang true and glowed like burning coals. Like it was almost as if my life was like this kind of scattergraph of stuff that I like doing, and that book just drove a line through all of them, linking them all. You know, like you look at your shelf and it's full of like owl skulls and feathers. The other shelf is full of drawings that you've made and bits of stone that you couldn't leave where they were, kind of thing. And it was kind of, on top of all of that, it kind of normalized the idea that a person could just go out and sleep outside. The idea had never occurred to me before. So that book was the like humanity.
So how old were you when you read that then? What sort of age were you?
About 22, I think. I'd just come out of university, and he was one of he taught us postmodernism for a couple of months, like a term kind of thing, and we got on. But I remember him talking about Mountains of the Mind. I don't think The Wild Places had come out at that point. But yeah, then I read The Wild Places because it had his name on it, and he was the only professor I had that had done anything like that. And also wild, you know, it's just the most sellable word in the world of literature.
Wild or adventure, the pair of them are sort of the marketeer's best friend, aren't they? Really, they're applied to absolutely everything. So what were you studying and where?
I did English at Cambridge, and yeah, that's what I did. 3 years there. Cambridge is good. It's got the River Cam and a ton of folk pubs, basically. Session kind of pubs where people still play the fiddle, and it's that old Irish word crack. There's a lot of it, and so it's good. It's a good place, Cambridge.
That's a very establishment university for someone who's so profoundly anti-establishment now. Were you like that there?
Well, in terms of education, I'm actually not anti good education. I'm anti the elitist aspect of it, obviously. There's the reputation of people that go to King's College, which I didn't go to, is that they all turn into Marxists and champagne socialists kind of thing. So that's labeled as the commie college or the Reds kind of thing. And I went to Magdalen College, which actually accepted women only about 3 years after Margaret Thatcher had become Prime Minister. So it was old school. But the sort of misinterpretation, I think, by people that haven't necessarily read the book is that because Trespass is such a sort of touchy subject, as Ant was saying before we started, there's this sense that I must be someone that enjoys breaking the rules. And the truth is, just couldn't be further from that, basically. I'm essentially, have I lost you?
No.
No, we're back.
No, there.
Yeah, I like an easy life. basically, and I don't like arguments. But there are some rules that have been created by and serve the very same people that they were created by, and they don't serve the many, they serve the few, and those are rules that deserve to be at the very least questioned. And obviously that's what a book, a book's a very good kind of technology for doing that.
Absolutely. I don't know if you can see the chat, Nick. I'm probably going to pronounce this wrong, and forgive me, Maloa. But I get my name pronounced wrong all the time. But Maloa is an international student at King's College, and she quite likes your description. So there we go. Brilliant.
Bloody commies.
So that's sort of the literary side then. So let's where's the arty Nick in all this? Where's the guy who does all these fabulous prints in the book? Was he lurking around as a kid?
I mean, yeah, I went outside to draw lots, but the truth is, I think that drawing's just I never really got the hang of meditation. I never really got the hang of sitting still. But drawing is a really good way of effectively doing both, but whilst doing something. You know, you become very still when you're drawing. Like, animals come up to you. That it's not that you stop being human, but it's almost like you stop acting human a little bit, because you're so still. Your breath slows. Like, this will be a whole other book one day, but I think the art market has destroyed the idea that the fundamental primary concern of drawing is that it makes your body feel good. And people that don't draw, I'd say by and large, every single person that I've met that doesn't draw kind of says, well, yeah, I like drawing, but I'm no good at it. And it's the art market that's made people think that the final outcome is the most important part of drawing. But the process of drawing is just very relaxing, and you see a lot more and you hear a lot more. And because you're not sort of stomping through the environment, like the bird calls change. So all the robins aren't going, watch out, and the magpies aren't going, oh, fucking hell. Like, they're called, they start speaking to each other, kind of thing. Like, you're less, there's less alarm in the landscape once you've been situated there for like an hour or so, and that's nice.
I love that phrase, that there's less alarm in the landscape, and that's spoken like a true artist who's able to use their observational skills. My daughter's great at this. She just notices everything, and then it will reappear in a little picture. And I think that's one of the beautiful things about people who are really good artists, is that really good observational skills. And that's clearly what you're bringing to the fore here. I mean, I've said it to you, Nick, and I said it in the letter. I think you're an illustrator in the truest sense of it, in that I don't think this is a book that you've written. For me, you've used your life and your actions and the things that you've done on the landscape of the canvas to illustrate some of the deepest things behind the social constructs behind the things that we see as, you know, just accepted and normality. You use that lovely phrase that you took from Downton Abbey, the sanctity of the done thing. And that's what that's really what you're illustrating for people. So for me, weirdly, I've never really come across anyone who straddles both the sort of literature and the artistic realms. Do you find it an easy swap between the two? Do the two complement each other?
Yeah, I think so. Like, I think there's lots of artists that, or musicians or writers that find it. It's probably that it's nice to do another sort of arty thing without the pressure of the product at the end of it. Like, I write songs and play lots of music, kind of Irish folk kind of stuff, and that's just good. I mean, that just feels good. Like when everyone knows the tune and everyone's slotting in, and you can, I never want the songs to end. It just feels amazing to be caught up in this kind of syncopated role. In terms of art versus and writing, I think the kind of Ruskin,
it's fucking money making it. So.
The kind of Octavia Hills and William Morris's are kind of big heroes of mine, and they were also very, very successful land reformers as well. Kind of a socialist bent to them. And Octavia Hill, who studied under Ruskin, was actually one of the people that set up. Not only did she save Hampstead Heath and save Epping Forest from being built on, but she also set up the National Trust. So I'll tell you what, it was doing something. Rob McFarlane wrote a poem for the Sheffield Tree campaign, and phoned me up and said, would you just illustrate it, kind of thing. Don't know what we're going to do with it. I did an illustration for it. And the women mainly of the Sheffield Tree campaign just basically used their just hard work and connectivity, their kind of WhatsApp groups, their Twitter, all of that kind of thing. And we're able to sell this print with Rob's signature on it, kind of thing, sort of using his capital of fame and talent, kind of thing. And the money raised was able to stop people going to prison on charges that were later found to be just illegal, basically made up by the police to stop people cutting down trees. And that was my kind of moment where I realized that art isn't actually decorative, or it can be. You can put one of my prints, lots of people have got my prints in their bogs, kind of thing, and it's very nice to sell a print, and it's nice to see it up above the toilet. But there is also a way that culture can lead a change of a mindset, but also very directly in the case of Hartwood, his poem. It can dissolve the walls of prison. Like people were not kept in prison for the 9 months that they would have been until their charges were dropped. So that's when I started rereading like Ruskin and William Morris and those people that drew and made and played and wrote, because honestly, I think they're witches and wizards more than they are artists, kind of thing.
Mm. It was funny to hear the Sheffield protests come out in your book, because they also featured in last month's book, which is Losing Eden.
Lucy Jones
and Losing Eden. And as someone who grew up not far from Sheffield and knows Sheffield as the outdoor city, it's always struck me as a really bizarre thing that the council found themselves embroiled in such a bizarre situation. But I think in the end it worked out quite well, and definitely showed the power of protest, didn't it? It showed the power of finding creative ways of challenging power, and I guess that's kind of what a lot of your book is about.
I think it also demonstrated that you don't need green hair and a bull ring through your septum and a tattoo on your face to query power. That like protest has always been sort of siphoned off into this kind of maybe punk aesthetic, and XR can be kind of sidelined into kind of like middle class spiritualism and that kind of stuff. And all these types of people are totally legitimate, their voices in their own rights, but also to see retired geography teachers and mothers of university students now, like to see just what a politician would call normal people doing it, I think is incredibly empowering, because it's not about lifestyle. It's about it's about community. It's about realizing, and of course, through the process of protesting, the community bonds and can go on to do other stuff as well, which is precisely what they're doing. God help Sheffield Council.
Well, that's actual democracy in action, not some kind of fabricated version of it. But I did love that. It was a genuine laugh out loud about they've got Gandalf in a chokehold. I mean, that was just brilliant. It was
Genuine quote as well. Like
it's a fab line from the book. I'm conscious of the time, and do we have any sunset there, or are we not sunsetting?
Not really, no, I'm afraid not.
Really. You're quite an artist yourself, in the sense of being a photographer. How does your kind of creative take relate to what Nick's talking about? Are you what are you trying to do when you capture an image of something?
For me, it's about creating representation of that time. So it's a memory, really. It's when I take a picture, it's storing that memory, because my memory's awful. But no, I think it's always been the same, even before I became a photographer. And I was always that person that took pictures all the time. It was just because I loved saving that moment and being able to look back on it. And everyone always laughs at me because I'm always looking back at photos, whether they're good or bad. It's just memories. It's been able to go back and revisit how you felt that point. Maybe someone's in that photo that's not there anymore. Maybe something's in that photo that's not there anymore, like trees or hedgerows, or landscape changes all the time. And sometimes it's great to look back and remember. So yeah, for me, it's about, I suppose, creating a postcard of that moment, really.
And Nick, do you ever use photography, or do you prefer to be in that meditative state where you try and capture the things that you're seeing whilst you're there?
Sometimes you've just got to be really pragmatic, because I make my money as an illustrator. So sometimes it's better to go out with your phone camera and just kind of snap stuff that jumps out at you in the woods or whatever, so that you can come back home and kind of work it up when it's not kind of spitting with rain or too windy to sort of blowing your pages around, kind of thing. I know that a hero of mine, Stand Onward, that did the front cover of Rob's latest book, Underland, but also did all the front covers of Radiohead. So he is my number one hero who is alive. He uses photos quite a lot. It's always sort of I guess it's always perceived as cheating, because the image of the artist is the one that will sort of measure stuff up with their thumb and their pen, kind of thing. But of course, you just want to get the best picture possible. So a lot of the time, I use cameras and stuff, but for the Right to Roam campaign, we use filmmakers quite a lot, and I have an enormous respect for someone that can point a lens at something and just make it look somehow magical, and that there is a real skill in photography that I don't possess, basically.
No, and it's definitely a skill that Ant possesses. I suspect that both of you are a little like me in that it's almost an excuse. Because to be honest, the reason I'm in this business is an excuse. My wife can probably hear; she's downstairs. But it's really just an excuse to go off on adventures and meet interesting people. And I definitely got the sense from you, Nick, that in fact, you even talked about when you decided you were going to write a book, you went back to your parents and it was it was an excuse to spend time in the woods. And I know from talking to Ant in the past that his photography is a bit of an excuse. It's a bit of a reason to get out there, and it's a weird word, isn't it? Excuse. It's got all those negative connotation, but really what it means is a good reason, or a credible reason that you can share with someone else that gives you a license to do that. Both of you, is that a big part of it? Is it a big excuse to get out there and spend more time in the outdoors?
And you go first.
Yeah, for me, I guess so. Especially now I've got a family. I guess it's I can't just wander out of my own will. Otherwise, I get beckoned back by angry text messages. So, but yeah, it is an excuse, I guess, and it's an excuse to meet friends that I might not always meet, and because you can, yeah, I'm going to work sometimes. I'm not really. So yeah, definitely it's a credible excuse, and it's something that I probably use far too often, really. But as well, the problem that I found with photography at one point was it was becoming everything for me. So I was going out for a walk or for a hike or for a cycle to take photos, and I did at one point start to forget why I was going outdoors in the first place. So probably why I started to enjoy running now, because you don't carry a camera when you run. So it's nice to be outdoors and enjoy it for that moment. And yeah, I've got my phone on me, so I suppose I do still take photos, but it's not about taking photos. So yeah, so it is, you have to weigh the both up, I think, and be careful that yeah, your art doesn't overtake your pleasures then, maybe.
What do you think, Nick? Is it a good excuse to get out there more?
It totally is, but I guess one of the things that's so hard to explain about our campaign, a lot of times people say, well, you've got 144,000 miles of footpath in England. Why do you want more? Which kind of sounds like a reasonable sort of defense against expanding our rights of access. But then whoever said that walking was the only thing that you could do in the countryside? You know, what about swimming, which is specifically argued against in or specifically banned in the Countryside and Rights of Way Act? What about rock climbing? What about mountain biking? For me, like the thing that I do, probably that I take most pleasure from in the countryside, this good old boy in West Berkshire taught me how to turn bowls on a lathe. But the thing that stuck with me, because I don't have a lathe, is stick making. And so at the moment, I've got about 20 staffs that I'm seasoning at the moment that I'll be able to basically stick making. The only thing that you really do is find the perfect stick, and then the art of it is to make it as straight as a pencil, basically. And that's this beautiful thing that gives it that kind of human touch. Then you sort of cap it at the bottom, maybe dowel it, attach some sort of horns to it, or whatever. But the real thing is, I've got holly, ash, hazel. I've got blackthorn, because the history behind the Irish blackthorn stick, the kind of witch's wand, and the Irish fighting stick. I don't know how many people know. I've forgotten the name now. The greatest protest song in Irish history involves an account of Arthur MacBride of a shillelagh being used to in an anti-authoritarian manner, is probably the best way to put it. But the point is, when you go for a walk, you're not just like whatever your reason or your excuse is, whether it's photography or it sort of enters you into the landscape in a different way. So I'll go into blackthorn groves, which I might not necessarily do, because obviously they're bastards. Basically, they've got those they got those nasty spikes that could, you know, you'd have amputate your hand if you don't get it sorted, kind of thing. But you find yourself looking in different ways, and you're trying to find maybe that's a straight bit of stick, but where's the handle? So you're sort of looking upside down to the larger branch that it's coming off. There's so many ways that we've forgotten old common crafts, commoners' crafts that we've forgotten. From corn dollies to wicker to stick making to marling. Like my girlfriend is a ceramicist, and she goes and digs wild clay, and processes it, and then makes all sorts of stuff out of clay. There's so many ways to interact with nature, and how walking along a right of way has become the only acceptable thing is kind of devastating to me. I don't understand it, and it's like urgently bad because there's so much that because you learn about the wood when you're stick making, you learn about it for real, you learn about it in your hands, and then you wonder about it, so then you learn about it on Wikipedia, and then you buy Peter Volborn's book, or Colin Tudge, The Secret Life of Trees, or Peter Fiennes' book Oak and Ash and Thorn. The visceral experience of nature then leads you on into a kind of more academic or educational kind of thing, but all that's blocked. So all we've got is this abstract idea is just that nature exists, and we're supposed to somehow care for it
without necessarily knowing it or understanding it or using it. This really reminds me of the conversation we had with John Wright, of the author of the Forager's Calendar, because that was exactly the same. It was about a different sort of experience in the outdoors and tangible ways of connecting with it. Yeah, I mean, you give me the sense of someone who's got a really strong connection with the natural world, and I know you're living on a barge at the moment, aren't you?
Yeah, that's right.
That feels like a very connected sort of residence. You're there all the time, aren't you? You are out in nature.
Well, it's like barging is the kind of middle class, socially acceptable end of traveling. Like the Telegraph newspaper will run an op-ed about how filthy travelers are, and the magazine that falls out of it will run a sort of 4-page photograph essay on how lovely it is to hire a narrowboat for a couple of days. But the truth is, we live our lives outside, really. Like even in the winter, it's about going out into the woods and finding the dead standing or the fallen bits of wood so you can fuel your stove. It's all about mud and rain. We live at the moment right by the River Avon, so I've been dipping in every day basically from about November, and now I'm swimming in the Avon without a wetsuit, and I've kind of built my brown fat, is how Wim Hof would describe it. Like I've kind of got my seal skin now. It's immersive for sure, or it can be. And there's just so much, basically the wooded valleys from Reading to Bath, which is what we did in September, and we're going back again now so that we can summer on the Thames. I mean, it's just going to be heaven living on the Thames. It's just going to be, and I'm bored of kingfishers now. That's not true. They're always awesome.
And so I guess there's things that you can and can't do because of that. What are the constraints that you've noticed because of that life on the barge and life in tune with the seasons?
Well, power is it's power and toilets, basically. That's what all boaters will talk to you about. What do you do with your excrement, and how do you get your power? And I tell you what, we've got 3 enormous solar panels on the top of our barge, and when about February, even around sort of end of February, early March, suddenly that's where spring hadn't really occurred yet. The wild garlic was out, but there was just this sense of everything opening up. Our duck hatches were open more, you know, like these things behind me. But all of a sudden the sun was in the sky for longer, and we didn't have to run the engine so that I could charge the laptop. It's not necessarily a more ecologically friendly way of living, because you know, I've never burnt so much coal. But then also you're closer connected to the implications of it. You know, I say I've never burnt so much coal, but every time I flick a light switch, that's pretty much still what's happening. It's just I have a sense of having to go out in the, you know, in the sleet, climb onto the bow, open the hatch, pour out the coal, stomp back and go and put it in just to be warm. But it's kind of slowed me down. Like London was getting busy for me, and certainly with lockdown, I just needed to swim, basically. So me and my girlfriend made a break for it, really.
And I know, talking to lots of artists, they find constraints a good, a useful driver for their creativity. Is it the same? Do you think you can see the influence of it on your creativity living in the way you do?
What kind of constraints do you mean?
Well, not always being able to flick a switch, having to light a fire to keep yourself warm, having to think about what happens to your toilet waste, all those sort of stuff. Does that work its way through into your creative output?
I don't think it's had the chance yet, because it was only in September that we made this break. My girlfriend's a sort of old wizened boater of the cut. Like she's done it for years. I think what it's done is help my it's really helped. I felt a sense of unwinding, basically. That there are things that need doing. And they need doing now a lot of the time. So this kind of previous existence I had, which was basically fueled by coffee, and just like and almost kind of a blinkered focus on what I was doing, is now more open. And because the Dundas Aqueduct and Conkwell Woods are so beautiful and so close, you've kind of wasted a day if you haven't gone out in daylight. So it has kind of slowed my rhythm a little bit, and allowed me to do more things that are kind of healthy. You know, my thighs are strong now because Bath is full of hills and we've climbed them, and that feels good. That's not through going to the gym. That's just through being led by wonder, basically.
Well, that seems like a really good opportunity to start delving deeply into the book, because led by wonder, there's a phrase in the book, and you say, I would swap 100 nice walks along a pretty right of way for this one moment of magic. And it feels like the whole book was you being led by wonder. It was you being sucked into the natural world, but not willing to experience it in the way that you were supposed to, or you were expected to, or within the constraints that, so we're back to constraints, within the constraints that society placed upon you. Where did the idea for it come from?
Honestly, I was on the way back home from meeting my parents, and my mum used to be an opera singer for a very, very short time early on in her career, until sort of illness got in the way of her touring. So every now and then, when we can all afford it, like maybe like once every few years, we go to Glyndebourne. It's like a sort of family thing. And I'd been to Glyndebourne, aka one of the poshest kind of calendar events, in England, kind of thing. and I'd got back on the train to go to London, and second class carriage was absolutely ram-packed full of just, you know, good cheer and people. And there was just literally, there wasn't even elbow space kind of thing. So I went on to first class, where there was just, there was like a whole carriage and one couple, a middle-aged couple kind of sitting there. First of all, they came up to me and said, "You probably don't have a ticket." And I said, "I absolutely don't have a first class ticket." Then they were incredibly patronizing. And then they called the guard, and the guard threw me out. And as I was sort of experiencing that kind of shame and that sense of that I had done something actually wrong, I realized what a great metaphor this is for the way land is distributed in England. There's all of this space for a very elite few, whilst the proles are kind of rammed into second class. It's obviously something, you know, to have made that connection, it's something that I would have thought before. But then you look into it and you realize just how concentrated land ownership is to such a very few. Basically, the moment I had that thought, I just happened to run into Guy Shrubsole, who was also writing a book which came out as Who Owns England? And it was the two of us that, you know, we spent a moment working out whether we were sort of literary rivals or whether we were just good mates. And we decided to run this campaign because we realized that books, there's just so much media for free, basically. So this could be an opportunity. Like the 80s were full of land rights movements, the 90s, nothing happened in the noughties pretty much. You know, George Monbiot was part of this Land Is Ours in the early 90s. We were both fans of a magazine called The Land, and ended up going to see Simon Fairley and Jill Barron. There is a heritage of land rights activism, but for some reason, we've just got bugger all, basically. We haven't got very far. And then weirdly, COVID came along and kind of made us realize that actually the world had realized, like I did, that nature exists. You know, you're sort of locked down, and you've got to walk basically that same right of way in your village or your town. And a lot more people are becoming conscious of how much space there is behind the barbed wire and the walls. So, you know, if it works or not, it's definitely worth a stab.
And had you trespassed and stuff before? Was that a kind of a natural area for you, or was it something that was new? I'm interested in whether it was like, okay, so I'm going to jump over the wall to use that as an illustration, or I can use this thing that I do of jumping over walls to illustrate this. Which one was it?
I'd probably, like with my sketchbook, I was accustomed to slipping through barbed wire fences because you get bored of just drawing the same angles from the right of way. And, you know, if a 500-year-old oak tree has come crashing down over there and the barbed wire says that you're not allowed to draw it because you don't own it, it didn't seem like too much of a issue to just sort of slip through and go and do that. And also in a village that I grew up in, like kind of everyone knows everyone. I knew that the farmer's name, you know, I sort of knew like there was less aggression basically. But in terms of jumping over castle walls and in terms of jumping over, like camping over in Duke's woodlands and stuff, that was like a visceral sort of feeling for me, that I just wondered, well, what is this power that a duke has anymore? Is it anything beyond fancy dress? Like, but is it like what could they do? And actually, there was a mass trespass organised on the 24th this Saturday, and by XR, and one of the groups went to trespass Richard Drax, who's a MP for South Dorset, who has direct links with basically the land that he owns, and he owns the largest brick wall in England. And I went to his spot to talk about the legacy of slavery in our countryside and how much common land was basically bought or walled off from the commoners of England from the profits of exploited West African labor, you know. But Richard Drax called the police, and several squad cars and a police helicopter turned up. Like, so that's an indication that the power of the landowner as a kind of pillar or kind of feudal lord of the local area is unacknowledged, but it's still very real and very current.
And I think it's the thing that really interested me about the campaign that you did this last weekend about encouraging people to do the mass trespass is your very realistic acceptance that there are a whole series of people who are being paid by the landowners, whether they're farmers or gamekeepers or whoever, that they're sort of in hock to these people to protect land rights which aren't theirs, which are someone else's. And I know this was, we were talking about this just before everyone joined us, Ant, about you were saying that you know lots of farmers who straddle both sides of the debate. But Nick, I was really impressed with the material that you sent out for the campaign, where you talked about actually, don't antagonize the people who are the ones who have to front up against you and challenge you on it. I thought that came from a real sense of solidarity with other normal folk. Is that what you tried to get across?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, our belief is essentially, I mean, this is historical fact, what existed before the exclusion of the commoners from their land, like sort of the total dominion of the property owner. Was a commons philosophy where you had rights to the land, but only if you owed it effectively your responsibility, which really means your work and your care and your thought and your discussion. So like this notion that the public represent kind of a threat to the countryside, and lockdown litter, Bournemouth Beach, Peak District, litter is no doubt a real serious issue, and it's actually something that's going to be central to our campaign. But also the abuse that farmers receive off ramblers, the kind of sheep worrying by dogs let off their leash. For the record, I don't think that we have a human right to walk our dogs off a leash. I do think we have a human right to swim in rivers. I can understand how landowners might feel threatened that this old orthodox idea, as I was saying before, like this kind of Farmer McGregor versus Peter Rabbit, this kind of like quaint, whimsical, last of the summer wine kind of enemies that is the farmer and the rambler. I can understand why farmers buy into that, because effectively that's all the media ever. That's just the role that has been given over time. But it's incumbent on us and in our campaign, and when we start doing our big trespasses, they're going to be led by botanists. They're going to be letters delivered to the landowners. The letter that we asked XR campaigners to deliver not only said that we're putting the countryside first, that the idea of leave no trace is as outdated from the 70s as a pair of flares. Like, we follow Lawyers for Nature, who are friends of ours, but also there are organizations set up to bring what's called legal standing, aka human rights, to rivers and trees. Their whole perspective is positive trace, like go there with a litter bag. Don't be frustrated that someone has dropped litter. don't wait for them to somehow have this kind of Damascene epiphany that, oh, it's rubbish to drop litter. Actively go there and pick it up. But crucial to all of this is the fact that once you come out of hospital, you know, you never, like right now, doctors and nurses are saving people's lives. And you just don't think about that until you're in hospital and you've come out, and all of a sudden, nurses and doctors are angels. They're like, you think, oh my God, like how amazing they are. The public don't give the respect to farmers and land working community that they are owed. And that's because we just don't see the work that they do. I've been out in Suffolk from Roger Deacon's place, leave at 7 a.m. with the dog and go walking for, you know, the whole day, come back when it's dark at like 10:30 in the evening. And the same farmer in the same, or probably the land worker in the same tractor is pretty much in the same field, because they're so bloody big in Suffolk, still working. There's no such thing as a weekend as a farmer. And they are being buggered by the government. They're being buggered by the supermarkets. And like we need to find a way to open a dialogue so that we can actually use a greater right of access to the countryside to kind of give the farmers the respect and the kind of worth that they deserve. So I understand that that's our job to do, but it is quite it's an uphill struggle to fight this kind of orthodoxy that we're just raving-eyed Marxists that want to burn woodlands down.
Well, that I mean, I'm sure that's how lots would want to portray it. And for someone who straddles both sort of the adventure and the country communities, if you like, how do you think that people who manage the land, you know, farmers, gamekeepers, that sort of thing, what do you think their perspective on this is?
From when I've been speaking to friends and when I've been doing photography, and I've worked with the Brecon Beacons Park and some of the rights of way people and natural resource Wales and everyone actually, and it's all much the same. For the most, they don't mind people walking across their land if they stick to, you know, the perceived paths. Really, it's when people take it on their own, I think, to maybe wander, oh, that's nice over there, I'll wander over there, you know, and they're pushing through livestock, or they're climbing fences. That's the big thing, is, you know, it's not necessarily they're wandering on the fields. The fields are big places, the hills are even bigger, you know. It's when they start climbing fences and lifting the bottom of the fence up to get their dog underneath it and things like that, you know, and all of a sudden you've got a worn semicircle hole in the bottom of your fence that livestock can get out from. And we did speak earlier where even comes down to professionals like event organizers that you know, maybe do a charity walk, you know, so it's for a good cause. But what they don't do then is afterwards is come back and take all their markers down and their ribbons on the trees. And all of a sudden then the livestock are chewing on the trees and chewing on the plastic ribbons and things like that. And that's what seems to get their back up. It's the disrespect, I think. But, you know, say we've got loads of byways and footpaths around here. And for the most, everyone doesn't mind people walking across them, you know. It's just respect, I think, isn't it? And that, I think that works on both sides. It's just about a mutual respect, and also respect the landscape. It just, I think that is the key word, isn't it? Just respect.
It was interesting, Nick, that in the Everybody Welcome campaign, you used the Scottish access code as opposed to the new English countryside code. What do you see as the distinct differences between the two? Why did you choose the Scottish code in preference to the English one?
Well, the thing is, the Scottish Outdoor Access Code was introduced with the right to roam in 2003. what it does is kind of specify like seasonal things to look out for, ground nesting birds, you know, lambing seasons, that kind of thing. But what it also does is kind of the English countryside code can't tell you the most ecologically sound and respectful to landowners way of wild camping, because wild camping is illegal. So we're in this situation where you can't safeguard people's approach to the landscape, because we're in denial that because it's against the law that no one's going to do it. People wild camp all the time. And yet there's nothing in England. Well, the British Mountaineering Society have just, or club or BMC, have just released a wild camping code, which is really good on video. You can find it on Twitter and YouTube. But the thing is, what a bizarre state of affairs. An official body advising how to do something that will very soon be criminal. England's in this weird, and Wales for that matter, where Anthony's from as well. But we're concentrating on England because we know that if we manage to do it in England, then Wales will follow very quickly, because Wales in many ways is much more advanced when it comes to access rights. But still, I mean, so we wanted people to look at the Scottish Countryside Code or Outdoor Access Code, because it looked at the truth of the situation. It sort of deals with the fact that people are going to access the countryside, and so here's all the things that you must think about whilst you are engaging in your rights. The English Countryside Code, not only following an FOI that we did the government, they're now spending £15,000 a year on it, but that was only, yeah, which is still bugger all, but it's much more than £2,000 a year, which is scandalous. Like that is the government's role to our landowners, that they are advising the general public by effectively paying for storage of a load of leaflets that are never printed. Like the Countryside Code in England needs to deal with access, not just in terms of people getting into fields, but also more systemic issues, such as like the amount of country or buses from the towns to the countries that have been cut. These are working, they're basically fences against the countryside that just exclude working class people that don't have enough money to have access to cars, you know, for their own transport there. The Countryside Code needs a rebooting, and unfortunately we've got to do that too. But we are working on that with basically a crack team of experts, and we're going to write a Countryside Code that's visionary and not effectively a kind of 6 bullet point PDF that you can download off the government website that basically says don't use disposable barbecues, leave the gates as you found it. All of this is great, but also crucial to this, the Countryside Code used to be taught in schools. I understand why it's not taught in schools anymore, because what's the bloody point? You know, there's nothing about the state architecture that is encouraging people to the countryside to change the law, but to also revamp the Countryside Code, a new charter for the countryside, to get farmers into schools and pay them well for it, to let them know, to get schools into farms. You've got to be rich to grow up in nature. Forest schools, Steiner schools, Montessori schools, child-led, nature-based education. You've got to be minted for that. Why the hell isn't our whole education system based around nature? Because it is the single most fundamental catastrophe that's happening at the moment, but also the single solution to it is us just knowing more and more about it, because only then can we care. Before we even mention the mental health and the physical health benefits, you know, so just crucially, we're not asking for rights. We're asking for rights and responsibilities, because, you know, we're commoners, and that is the idea of the old commons. And crucially, that's what's been lost. Once they took away our rights, they took away our right to act with experience and responsibility in the countryside. But of course, Dominic Raab will blame the idle English workforce. The Daily Mail will blame the inherent sort of villainy of the people on Bournemouth Beach, and none of these people want to look at the systemic issues that are the architecture behind it all.
And I think that's everything that you're trying. That's everything you're trying to do. There's a great comment from Alex in the chat about the Lake District advice on how to camp or not camp, and I do think the Lake District have been quite forward thinking on this. But you know, that's what you're trying to illustrate, isn't it? You are trying to show the power relations which lay behind all of this sanctity of the done thing, the way things must be. You're trying to point that out and make that plain to folk in ways that, you know, I loved the Garfinkeling in the book of you know, obviously of the jumping over the walls and putting yourself beyond the pale and all that, but I got a really strong sense of that in the drug use as well. And you know, as soon as you got to that first dell and you were settling down in front of the fire, and we rolled a joint, I thought, that's very purposeful. And then you could see it continue through and kind of notching up a gear every time with that. And it's mushrooms and it's ecstasy. And I got a sense of what you were doing. And then you introduced the concept of Garfinkeling. And that seems to me to be the whole concept of the book is you Garfinkeling this whole thing. Is that what you were trying to do?
Absolutely. One of my best friends from university that was also taught by Rob McFarlane was shot through the center of the head, and the bullet left the base of his neck when he was basically on special ops in Afghanistan. He's got 2 children and a wife that he loves very dearly, but PTSD is just bubbling rage and sadness underneath him. He's still the lovely dude, you know, he's still lovely, but like it cracks sometimes. Because he was so, you know, he was learning Farsi and Arabic whilst I was taking ecstasy at university. The first time that he took MDMA was when his basically army counselor just a year ago advised that it might help him express himself in a way that he was just too knotted up to do. And hearing him describe what it was like, but it sort of made me cry, but it also made me hoot with laughter, because he was just sort of telling it the old cliche of like, you know, you're there raving and you just chat to your friends and you love them so much, and there's, you know, you feel so overwhelmed with just enthusiasm and positivity kind of thing. That helped him and is helping his family and is allowing a closer bond between him and his children. However, David Nutt got sacked for Professor David Nutt for his comments on cannabis and MDMA. And there is an orthodoxy in England that is harming the English, and it lies in the land, and it lies in just drugs as an example kind of thing, but also in whose England is it anyway? You know, also in the kind of vicious attacks, as I was saying earlier, on Corinne Fowler, by just telling the history, just saying what happened with regards to, you know, 400 years of slavery. You know, the English were slaving for twice the amount of time that they weren't so far. So who's telling that story? the bubbles need bursting, and they need bursting because we're addicts to this kind of this creed that has been serving the 1% and draining the 99% for so long. And the book goes, there's a whole chapter where I go and trespass Paul Dacre's estate and talk about migration and my time in the Calais jungle. Because again, like my friend not being able to take ecstasy until he was prescribed it, causing real damage to families, real life families that I love. Similarly, the notion that, well, the referring to migrants as cockroaches, which wasn't actually, that was the son that did that, but then the carrying on of Paul Dacre's incessant obsession with the insect life of migration, this projection of people, you know, from doctors to dustmen in Syria, fleeing barrel bombs, this notion that they only want to come to England because England's so great. It is a kind of outrageous egotism that that is really harming people, and so, you know, that, you know, a curse on those orthodoxies, and I will work like countless other people to burst them. And Charles Moore, just in The Spectator, I tried to write a letter of complaint to The Spectator, but they gave me 175 words. I said, give me a right to reply, because Charles Moore had written, Charles Moore used to edit The Telegraph. He's like, I don't know if the name rings a bell, he's always on Question Time. He's, I think, going to be the new controller of the BBC. And he wrote a little op-ed in The Spectator just when everyone was out trespassing on the 24th, that I was inciting hatred towards landowners. So I got my mates at Lawyers for Nature to explain to me how that accusation could have got past the lawyers of The Spectator. And my mate said, well, basically, inciting is a very hard word to prove or disprove, and hatred, for all of its extremity, you can say you hate anchovies. You know, people use it as a, so this is the fight back that happens, like the really vicious attacks. And it's why I'm still a bit sharp today, and I apologize for that. Like, this is now face to face with the orthodoxy, and on the plus side, it shows that our campaign is getting through. But there's going to be, I don't know if I mean, our hashtag is extremely non-violent direct action, and we're talking Morris dances, picnics, and botanists, basically. But there is such a vicious kickback from the people that were benefiting of this fable of Britannia rules the waves, and Britannia has ruled the waves, but, you know, the profits and the power went just basically went to the landowners. That's how they shored up their power. As soon as the slavers came back, or the nabobs from East India, the first thing you did was buy enough land so that you, in an unreformed parliament, you could qualify to become an MP. And then you go and wrote the Enclosure Acts so that you could get more land.
And I think, you know, obviously that's at the book, and that idea of conceptual conservatism and how it is that society manages to perpetuate these beliefs of status and roles and responsibilities that have long been disproved, but they're still there, and actually kind of deeply embedded in our national psyche, which is, I mean, that's a big challenge that you're facing up to, is sort of challenging a bit of a core of our national psyche. can it work? Can you make a difference? Can you change things?
Don't know. I've spoken to I mean, my number one fear is that I'm going to become a flinty, acerbic, nihilistic ex-activist, and there's plenty of them around that have beaten their head against the coalface for so long, only to have their words twisted and orthodoxy, you know, to return, kind of thing. First lockdown, all of my mates were going like, well, bloody hell, like this is the whole world could change now. Like Rishi Sunak is this close to a universal basic minimum wage. Effectively, the whole world has been socialist for the last year. Like people have been protected, the homeless have been homed, you know, like money pumped into the NHS. We're all out there clapping like the National Health Service. Boris Johnson's saying the National Health Service is, or the Conservative Party are the party of the National Health Service. Like for us, either that really sticks in your throat and you want to spit it out, or it's the ultimate victory of socialism, that the NHS has become orthodox to the point where the Conservatives can no longer attack it, as they can, as the Republicans can in America for anything close to the NHS, Obamacare, for being Marxist. I mean, you know, it's self-harm what the Americans are doing to themselves, and also in England. But I don't know if it can be done. It's literally 1,000 years since William the Conqueror came in and just changed common land to forbidden land. Basically, that's the source of it. People have died. People have been transported, hanged, you know, for poaching, as just an example, which used to be called hunting until Lord whatever put up a fence and called it hare game, because that was fun for his mates to go and shoot them, whereas the people, you know, were starving. Like, it's really serious. It's really, really serious. And that kind of, you know, we all get our food from supermarkets now, but that kind of, the wealth and the bounty of the land has translated into, and it being removed from us, has translated into an obesity epidemic, a mental health crisis, you know, ADHD to depression, to stress. Like, England is suffering from its lack of access to nature. And it's not, and you know, and it's not just me, it's a ton of people that are doing it. Shared Assets just released a map of all the different work that's going on. And Right to Roam's just the tip of the surface. Like, you know, I'll probably retire once we've got Right to Roam, but then someone else will come along and do land value tax, which will be the real leveler. Community, when Scotland did Right to Roam, they also did the community right to buy, so that communities can be, we were just on the email today with Lawyers for Nature, and there's, you know, they're talking about giving rights to rivers, so why not buy rivers and then give it to the river, which is a mind-blowing, but there are ways, like New Zealand's done this, India has done this. There are legal frameworks that, you know, you can get people to act on behalf of the river, from ecologists, you know, like sort of water flow experts, people that know what they're talking about, that could advise on what the river would want. And the fundament to all of that is sustainability. Like, we all want to just carry on, basically. So there are some hugely radical concepts associated to land. Land in Our Names would be another standout that is actively seeking and creating spaces for people of color to farm and to engage with the outside world, outdoors world, flock together, Black to Nature, like all of these organizations. But Land in Our Names is specifically framing it in terms of reparations for slavery. And people get very angry about that. But then if you look at the sort of inherited trauma and the kind of systemic lack of life opportunity for kids growing up in England that have a color of skin that isn't white. Something has to be done, you know, and there's just lots of people working on it.
And if ever there was, a moment of change, it's after a crisis, isn't it? And it's after a crisis that makes you question all those things that you never questioned before. And I think that's the beauty of your book, Nick. I think you not only do you help people question things, but you kind of push them gently in the direction of asking those questions. There's a couple of lovely comments. Joe said the world is changing thanks to books like yours, Nick. Well done for bursting the bubbles. And Deborah says, I'm in, see you on the wrong side of the fence, which I guess is the point of it. I really
sign up to write2rome.org.uk and you know, we're going. Like there's two big ones planned. Like the book won't do anything on its own. The real danger of the book is it just becomes kind of fluff, like kind of fetishizing the idea of adventure, whilst also not whilst also just sitting on your shelf kind of thing. The real thing, you know, this is Gerald Winstanley that led the Diggers. You know, action is all. Words are great. They incite, they create, and dialogue is really vital as well to be able to understand, as you know, from Anthony's beautiful kind of oil painting scene there by the fire at the moment. They help us understand the other side of the fence, but like yeah, we've got like it's about action now, you know.
Well, from saying you're like you're like an illustrator using your life as the paint and the landscape as the canvas. I think you've turned into Pied Piper there. You're kind of leading us all in the direction that we're going to go. Nick, what a fabulous conversation. Thank you so much. I love the book. I know folk love the book. And yes, it is just words, but I do think it's more than that. And I mean, Deborah says it in the chat there about the book being perfectly timed. It does feel like we're on the cusp of a different understanding, which has been forced upon us by kind of circumstances outside our control, and it's down to us to wrestle it. So yeah, I think what you're doing with the Right to Roam campaign is absolutely brilliant. I do still think that you're the guy that Guy Shrubsholl calls Nick the local historian in his book, which did make me smile when you pointed me in his direction, because I think you are so not a local historian. I speak with a mother who is a local historian, and
I have a huge respect for local historians. They're the keepers of the kind of palimpsest history of the land. No one else cares. It's those dudes. I met loads whilst checking out enclosure maps in, you know, Richard Benyon's estates and stuff.
But I'm not trying to do them down. I'm trying to big you up in the sense that what you're doing is joining all these little parochial dots and these little isolated things to make a bigger point. And I think it's a point that needs making now and is superbly well made. So thank you. I look forward to the next book. Traditionally, we don't talk about next books on here because we never know whether we're going to feature them or not. But I look forward to seeing where this is going. I look forward to following the Right to Roam campaign. I think it's fab. I would encourage everyone to go and check that out. What lovely comments in the chat as well. Thank you, everybody. I'm glad you've enjoyed. I'm glad you've enjoyed it tonight. I've really enjoyed it. I think it was definitely worth the extra half hour. We wouldn't have done Nick justice otherwise. Thank you, Anne. Thank you for joining us. The outdoor vibes were wonderful. Just what we needed. I hope tea was nice. And for now, that's it. We will be doing this again next month. next month we'll be back with our author of Adventurous Ink, who comes from a very different place, but is probably as enthusiastic about changing things and helping us understand the way things are and how that impacts on people. Everybody, thank you so much. Thanks again, Nick. Thanks, Ant. Thank you all. Have a lovely evening, and yeah, I will see you again next month.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Tim.
If you want to do that traditional popping your camera on and giving us a wave, that's always a nice way to end, isn't it? So I'll give you all a wave.
No star.
Yeah, look, there's people there. They're all here. Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. That was brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Ant. You're a star. Appreciate it. I'm going to put the digital phone down now. I'll let you get back. I'm guessing it's getting pretty chilly there.
It's all right with the fire, actually.
Well, that's 'twas ever thus. 'Twas ever thus. Right, brilliant. Thanks, everyone. See you later. Bye.
Yeah.